Hi, that's Alessio. Hope you're well. In this video, we're going to take a look at our war indicator, and we're going to find out what the war meter is telling us, and also what the impact of a war against Iran could be on the stock market and also on Bitcoin as well. So we're going to discuss this in this video. Now, before we go into that, let me just give you some context. I'm sure you've heard the news recently that there are some reports that are blaming Iran for an attack on an oil tanker in the Middle East. So according to the CIA, a mine was exploded in an oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman, and they're saying, essentially, the CIA is saying that Iran is responsible for this. Now, let me just say something about this. Even though we're being told that Iran is responsible for this mine explosion, there are some people who do not actually agree with this point. And guess who does not agree? The owner of one of the oil tankers. According to recent reports, the Japanese owner of one of the oil tankers attacked near Iran on Thursday says the vessel was struck by a projectile, not by a mine. In fact, he says we received reports that something flew towards the ship. Let me play a short clip from this interview. Here it is.
The crew is saying that it was hit by a flying object. They are saying that something came flying. To put a bomb on the side is something that we are not thinking.
All right, guys, so as you heard there, the owner of one of the oil tankers is saying that the attack did not happen by the explosion of a mine, but an attack from above, something flying from above towards the ships. So I think there are two possibilities we need to consider here. Either the reports are true, in which case Iran is being deliberately provoked into making an attack. In other words, Iran is being deliberately pushed into making a mistake to start a war. Or there is a second possibility, that the warmongers are deliberately staging an attack, a fake attack, and putting the blame on Iran. Now, I know you're probably thinking, that is ridiculous. That sounds like a conspiracy theory. Why would anyone fake an attack to start a war? Well, let's cast our mind back to 1964. I wonder if you can remember the reason why the Vietnam War started. What was the reason that started the war against North Vietnam? Well, here it is. You see, guys, back in 1964, President Lyndon Johnson was lied to by the CIA. President Johnson was told by the CIA that two ships in the Gulf of Tonkin had come under fire in international waters, and that it was an unprovoked attack. Sound familiar? And they blamed the attack on North Vietnam. And by the way, what happened some years later? A top secret paper called the Pentagon Papers were leaked. And guess what this top secret paper said? It said that the attack on the 4th of August 1964 may never actually have happened. In other words, the so-called attacks on the two US ships were deliberately staged, they were faked to get us into a war against North Vietnam. Let me read you an important quote from Hermann Goering, one of the Nazi generals. Here's what Goering said. The common people don't want war, neither in Russia, nor in England, nor in America, nor for that matter in Germany. That is understood. But the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in every country. That was Hermann Goering, one of the Nazi generals, explaining how warmongers get us into accepting a war against another country. So guys, I personally think that we're being lied to once again because the warmongers want us to accept another war, this time against Iran. And who knows what they might do. They might stage an attack once again on a ship in the Gulf regions, and then blame it again once again on Iran. By the way, when I say warmonger, I'm referring to neocons like John Bolton. I am not referring to the president. I do not believe President Trump wants a war. Actually, I think the president wants to avoid a war with Iran. There are just people around him, people like John Bolton and the neocons, who are trying to push the president in the wrong direction. And by the way, I'm not the only person who's saying this. Fox News, right-wing Fox News, agrees with this point. By the way, let me just say this. I don't agree with many things that Tucker Carlson may say, but on this point, I think he is right. I do agree with him on this one point. Let me play it for you.
Because if there's one thing Washington loves more than open borders and fat lobbying contracts, it's pointless wars half a world away. Contractors get rich, neocon intellectuals feel powerful. Bill Kristol, Max Boot, and Nancy Pelosi agree on one thing. War is good as long as the war does not help the United States. John Bolton finds himself in that camp. A lifelong neocon, Bolton repeatedly has called for toppling the Iranian government again and again, though tellingly he's never suggested what might replace the Iranian government once it's toppled. Now, some of that is bluster, obviously, but some of it is exactly what it looks like, the groundwork for conflict. We are moving toward, however slowly, some kind of confrontation with Iran. Now, that should worry everybody, but it should especially be of concern to anyone who supported the president. If President Trump decides to go to war with Iran, it will destroy his presidency, just as the Iraq War destroyed the presidency of his Republican predecessor, George W. Bush. Attacking Iran is not like intervening in Libya or Syria, or even like invading Iraq. It entails far greater risk and much higher costs. Geographically, Iran is about 4 times the size of Iraq. It has 3 times as many people as Iraq had when we invaded. Iraq was a divided country along religious lines. Iran is not. It's cohesive. It's a much richer country, too, with a military that has spent many years preparing for a U.S. invasion. It's a formidable force. In 2002, the U.S. military carried out a war game that was widely understood to be a simulation of an invasion of Iran. It went badly. America suffered more than 20,000 casualties in a single day, and officials halted the game. So the question is not, could America beat Iran? Yes, it could. The question is it ready to try? Well, less ready than ever, actually. Compared to 2003, our country is deeper in debt and far more politically divided than it's been since the Civil War. Our military is overstretched. Ask anyone in it. Does anyone outside of Washington actually support a new war in Iran? Well, the Saudi royal family does. So do the leaders of other Sunni Gulf states. They see Iran as their greatest rival, and they'd love to have America fight a war against Iran for them. Why wouldn't they? President Trump's own supporters know better than this, though. You'll remember that back in 2016, during the Republican primary debate in South Carolina, Donald Trump was the only person on that stage to call the Iraq War a mistake. He vowed never to repeat anything like that and promised that if elected, he would act only in America's interests. Now, the morons handicapping the debate on television predicted Trump would lose. It was over. Saying that had sealed his fate. And, of course, they were wrong, and he won. Republican voters agreed with him, it turned out. They had a better sense of the truth. A lot of their kids were serving in the military. 2.5 years later, amazingly, the president's advisors are telling him he must abandon that promise. Iran is too important, they say. It's the greatest threat this country faces, despite the fact that virtually every terror attack in America has been inspired not by Iran, but by Iran's Sunni enemies. Doesn't matter.
All right, guys, so I hope that the president does not listen to people like John Bolton and actually tries to avoid military conflict as much as possible. Let's turn our attention now to the war indicator, the stock of Lockheed Martin. Now, the reason why I'm looking at the stock of Lockheed Martin, or LMT, is because it's often a good leading indicator for a war. We've seen before, just after 9/11, that the stock of Lockheed Martin skyrocketed. Why? Because market participants were expecting a war to occur. So often looking at the stock of Lockheed Martin can give us clues as to what potentially might happen also as to another war. Let me also make it very clear that I would never consider putting a dime into the stock of Lockheed Martin because it's extremely immoral. This is a company essentially that makes weapons of war that ends up killing innocent human beings, not to mention innocent soldiers as well. So as far as Lockheed Martin is concerned, the war meter has tremendously gone up. It's gone up from near about 300, it's gone up to almost 360, and is now potentially about to make a breakout above the previous highs it made there as well. Now, this appears to be a wave 5 situation, so this appears to be the wave 5 in Elliott wave theory. Waves 3 and 4 apparently have completed here, and a break above resistance could potentially signal a move towards the 400 level as the next likely levels it might test. The bottom line is this: as long as Lockheed Martin is pushing higher, this could be an indication of further tensions and potential military conflict in the Middle East. Now, you may ask, what are the potential consequences on the stock market and Bitcoin? Now, as far as the stock market is concerned, I asked Peter Brandt about this, and here's what he said about a potential war, or what a consequence of a war might be for the stock market. Here's the clip. I just think, is there any kind of correlation, do you think, between war and, let's say, the stock market? Is it positive? Is it negative?
No, I don't know. I've seen studies that basically wash that out, that you get an initial reaction, and the initial reaction is temporary and it's not lasting. You know, it could last a day, it could last a week, it could last a month, and eventually other things come in and become the drivers. That wars are not long-term drivers of a market. If you think about what's really driving a market over months and months and months, it is not global conflict.
All right, guys, as you heard there, Peter and I agree that a war probably will not do much to the stock market. The stock market mostly depends on economic data, not so much on wars and things like that. Now, what about Bitcoin? There is a theory that if there is a war in the Middle East, a war against Iran, for example, that perhaps Persians or Iranians may pour their money into Bitcoin and might boost Bitcoin further higher. I got to tell you, personally, I don't think this is very likely. Mostly because from my own personal travels, I've traveled to Iran at least a few times. And what I've noticed is that folks in Iran actually are more likely to buy gold than they are Bitcoin. So usually in times of uncertainty, folks in Iran, people in Iran usually buy gold. And we can see at the moment, gold has certainly surged significantly higher. We know that in times of uncertainty, in times of chaos, gold usually does go up. And this is actually a market we're keeping an eye on at the present moment. It's very interesting. All right, guys, before I finish the video, I just want to say a couple of things very quickly. Firstly, that we're doing a members webinar with Linda Raschke, one of the world's top traders. Plus, also in July, we have a webinar, a members webinar with Dominic Frisby, the author of the book, Bitcoin, The Future of Money. So that's going to be quite interesting as well. We're going to ask Dominic about the future of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. And you will have a chance to ask Dominic your own questions, by the way, about cryptocurrencies and other markets too. So that's two important webinars, two member webinars we're doing in July. If you're not a member, by the way, you can become a member today by joining on this link you see here, which is leadingtrader.com/join. And guys, if this video has helped, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe for future updates. Thanks a lot.